Hey guys, welcome to Pistons Talk Podcast post-game show. Hope you guys are having a great Sunday evening. We are going to get into today's post-game podcast. The Pistons played the Chicago Bulls tonight in a matinee game. 3 o'clock. I have an opinion. I actually like Sunday afternoon games, like around 3, 4 o'clock. I don't know about you guys, but I don't mind the 7 o'clock starts. But I'm a big fan of having like 3, 4 o'clock games. I don't know about you guys, but before we do get into today's post game show, a couple things I'd like to ask you guys if you can make sure when you're coming in watching this post game show to hit that like button if you are watching live on YouTube, and if you are an audio listener and that's where you listen to our podcast, make sure to give us a 5-star review. We're available on every podcast platform. Wherever you get your podcast, we're probably on there. But let's get into today's post-game show. So the Pistons host the Chicago Bulls at home today. And this was a game in which I was a little bit nervous for, just because how offensive the Chicago Bulls are as a basketball team. They don't play a whole lot of defense, but the numbers back them up as one of the top tier offensive teams. And that's exactly what we saw in the first quarter. The Bulls in transition were pushing the pace, the dribble penetration, the ball movement, everything that you probably remember the first time the Pistons hosted the Chicago Bulls this season was happening again. But the Pistons were able to keep pace with them. Obviously, no Zach LaVine, as he's expecting, I believe, his third child. So he was not active for the Chicago Bulls. Tobias, I do want to say in the first quarter, I felt like he was very active on both ends, defensively and offensively. So you have to tip your cap to Tobias in the first quarter. Jalen Duren, again, just comes out aggressive, looking for his shot, looking to get involved offensively. And it does help when you have a point guard like Cade Cunningham just throwing you lobs, right? But the Bulls did get out to a little bit of a lead. Malik Beasley did come off the bench, help the Detroit Pistons, cut the lead down to 5 to end the first quarter. So the Bulls had a 35-30 lead to end the first. Going into the second, I thought what was so crucial for the Pistons to come out of this second quarter was really move the basketball, because when you're versing a team like Chicago, you can't go isolation heavy. You can't just maybe make 1 or 2 passes. That ball has to swing side to side. And I thought in the second quarter, the three-point shooting was on full display, whether it was Fontecchio, whether it was Beasley. These guys were just moving the basketball. Ron Holland, super active tonight. He was probably one of the very few Pistons that did not get into double digits in scoring, but he did have 4 steals. There was one play in particular, which I'm sure you guys will probably see if you watch the game back or you're just scrolling on social media. He goes for a loose ball, rips the ball away from Kobe White, gets up. Cade's pushing the ball up in transition, finds a trailing Ron Holland, scores the basketball. Not even 10 seconds later, he forces a turnover with the Chicago Bulls, and they get the ball back. Like, Ron Holland is just such a burst of energy off the bench, and really loved what I saw out of him tonight. And Cade as well. Cade had over 10-plus assists, a low turnover night for him. I believe he had 15 assists on the night, but he really had a great second quarter. Really got to his spot, setting up his teammates, which I thought was really crucial for him. And Jalen Duren stepped up while Cade was on the bench, which we're seeing more consistent Jalen Duren. I would say the month of January has been his best month just throughout the season, and probably the best stretch of basketball he's played in the Detroit Pistons uniform. He had a double-double tonight, and he was really aggressive. He looked to go at Nikola Vucevic anytime that he was matched up with him, catching lobs, going for offensive rebounds. Um, he just looks locked in. He looks more focused, and you love to see that out of your starting center. And the Pistons do get a 10-point lead to end the second quarter, 64-54. Now, that 10-point lead, coming out of halftime, went away very quickly because the Chicago Bulls came out and they're like, we got to get back into this game. They went on a little run and they dwindled that Pistons lead down all the way to 2 points. But what happened after around that like 5 to 6 minute mark is, Cade and those guys started to distribute the basketball a little bit more. The ball movement, Asar Thompson was really active in the third quarter, and Cade was just looking to set up his teammates. And during catching lobs in the third quarter, Asar with the backdoor cuts, Tim Hardaway Jr. not settling for 3-pointers tonight, which I think he's done a really good job throughout the season of doing that. Malik Beasley hitting his shots. It was a really good test for the Pistons not to lose that lead, and they didn't. They end the third quarter with a 95-86 lead going into the fourth. And the Bulls went on a little run when Cade was out. I think the Pistons' plan was we play Atlanta tomorrow. Let's try to see if we can rest Cade Cunningham. And the lead that they did have, they were up as many as 12 points, dwindled away very quickly. Bulls went on an 11-0 run before Cade Cunningham did come back in around the 7-minute mark. And Cade came in and he closed the basketball game. I mean, that's what all-stars do. The ball movement down that stretch was just beautiful. It was excellent. If you just look at the box score tonight, you guys, 38 assists for the Detroit Pistons, season high, 80 points in the paint. Set a record. Last time the Pistons had 80 points in the paint, 1996, 1997. I was 4 years old. So it's been a minute since the last time the Pistons had 80 points in the paint. But I think you really have to credit Asar, Duran, Cade. They attacked the Chicago Bulls, being a little bit smaller in the front court. The Bulls started, I believe, 4 guards in their starting lineup because of injuries. But JB Bickerstaff and the Detroit Pistons tonight just did such a great job of attacking the weakness that they did have because of injuries. Final score of this game, 127-119. Pistons end the week 2-2. They're on a 2-game winning streak. They host Trae Young and the Atlanta Hawks tomorrow. So that is going to be a big test. Obviously, Atlanta does not have Jalen Johnson, one of their best, or if not their second best player on the Atlanta Hawks. But it'll be really interesting to see how the Pistons come out tomorrow, if they have tired legs or not, or they can get their third straight win and start stacking wins and try to get to that 6th seed in the Eastern Conference playoff race. They're currently the 7th seed right now. So it'll be really interesting to see what happens. I do want to open up the show to questions, comments, overall thoughts like we usually do. If you're new here, after we're done kind of talking about the quarter notes, we open up the show to people that are watching live on YouTube. I know it's trading deadline season. It is January 2nd as I am recording this podcast. The trading deadline ends on the 6th of January, so it'll be really interesting to see what happens, especially with the trade last night. Like I'm still trying to process Luca Doncic in a Los Angeles Lakers uniform and Anthony Davis in a Dallas Mavericks uniform. I think the Pistons are to blame for that. I mean, Cade drops a 40 burger on the Mavs and they decide, hey, we're going to go trade for Anthony Davis. But I mean, Pistons have been the cause of a lot of drama in the NBA. I mean, Jaden Ivey's game winner, Mike Brown gets fired. Like, Pistons are causing some trouble in the NBA. But we're going to open up the show to questions and comments. We're just going to take a quick commercial break, and we will be right back, you guys. Okay, you guys, we are back. Now, this is the part of the show where we answer any questions, comments, overall thoughts with this game, or if you have any questions about the Detroit Pistons, maybe questions, overall thoughts with the trading deadline, I will try to answer them the best that I can. We do have a super chat from Stevie J. So I appreciate Stevie J for the $5 super chat. And I think one of the questions he had was that Mo Bamba just got waived too. Mo Bamba was part of the trade earlier this week. What I will say is this: Mo Bamba is a name. He's a piece. He hasn't really lived up to the hype, Stevie. What I would say is like I would expect contenders to buy low on him to sign with another team. I don't really know if there's interest from the Detroit Pistons, given if you look at their center just depth chart, you have Duran, you have Stewart, and you have Paul Reed. But he's a name to definitely keep an eye out for contending teams. I think they will definitely try to buy low on him. It's just like a depth piece overall. But I do appreciate the the super chat, Stevie. But thank you for that. I'm just like periodically looking at my phone because I get like Twitter notifications. I just got one. I thought it was a trade, but it's just the Detroit Pistons. Thank God. You never know with this time of year. Want to get into Cruza's comment saying that the Pistons played their most complete offensive game this season against the Bulls today. Several guys played very well. I agree. When you're moving the basketball like that and you're not turning the ball over, like we've seen so many times this season with the Detroit Pistons, I believe they only turned the ball over 11 times to Chicago's 20. It's beautiful basketball. It's no selfish ISO basketball. The ball's moving side to side. They're just making those hockey assists, those extra passes, and it looks great when the ball's going in. And you look at Chicago. Chicago almost shot and made 23 pointers, and they still lost to the Detroit Pistons tonight. This wasn't a game where the Pistons shot great from three, and they still found a way to win because they were so dominant in the painted area. If they weren't as dominant in the painted area, they probably lose this basketball game. Hot Rod Holland was awesome. I've seen a couple new nicknames for Ron. I've seen Hot Rod Holland from Jeremy Banks. I've seen Havoc Holland. And I've seen some others that I'm not going to repeat on this show. I feel like I'm not qualified to say those nicknames. But yeah, Ron Holland has just been such a dog off the bench. Like you just love to see just the type of way he plays. He's scrappy, diving for loose balls. Like you have such a luxury of having a star in the starting lineup, and then you have Ron Holland to sub him if Sar's in foul trouble or he just needs a break. But yeah, Ron Holland, 4 steals tonight, really active, really got into just the Bulls' chest defensively, just making like all those winning plays that don't show up in the box score. Chuck Brewer, this team plays so unselfish, it's a thing of beauty, and I for one would pass on ball, but that's just me. Yeah, I saw a lot of Pistons fans, especially on the timeline tonight, that Lonzo Ball was auditioning to become a Detroit Piston. And I do agree, Chuck. Like this team, when they're winning, a lot of guys are in double figures. There's not just like 230-point outbursts. It's multiple guys, anywhere from 5 to 6 to 7 guys that are in double figures. It's balanced scoring. It's just team basketball. And I think that's something that a lot of Pistons fans are very used to. Is any winning team we've had, there hasn't really been a superstar, averaging 30, 40 points a game. It's always been team basketball, and everyone contributes at the end of the day. But the Lonzo Ball thing, I'm still kind of up in the air. I do think they need a secondary ball handler, especially with Jaden Ivey being out right now. But it'll be interesting to see what happens with this trading deadline. We still have another 4 days of it. I'm sure there's a lot of trades that will happen during this deadline, but interesting to see what will happen. Dante, did Asar get injured late? I know he went to the locker room. Now, he could have just gone to the bathroom because that does happen, but he did play in the fourth quarter to end the game. I think he's good. I did see some people, questioning whether or not he was injured. I think he just went to the bathroom, or maybe he went in the back with the medical staff just to get something checked out. But it's a good sign that he did come back in the game and he was playing to end the fourth quarter. If he is injured, we will probably get a injury update by the end of the night from the Detroit Pistons PR. But I think Asar's good as of right now. I could be wrong though. Adam Perry, if Jalen Duren can actually be an offensive option on the court, if he can play like this, we have a center, and now we have two long-term pieces locked. I think Jalen Duren offensively, I apologize. I keep looking off to the side. I keep seeing all these. It's just the Pistons. The Pistons are just going crazy, as they should. Their social team's doing a really good job. Kind of got my thoughts. I'm talking about Jalen Duren offensively. Okay, yeah. So Jalen Duren offensively has always had a bag. It's just, I think for a big portion of the season, he wasn't getting as many touches as he was last year. And I think Cade has done a much better job of getting JD involved early. And you see what happens when you get him some lob touches, get him some baskets like around the rim in the painted area. If you get him involved, he's more active throughout the game. And I think the coaching staff and Cade have done a very good job of getting him involved. But I do agree. If he's going to get you a good 15 to 18 points a night being active, then yeah, you have a center of the future. He's due up for a contract extension. If he keeps playing like this, the Pistons probably will offer him an extension at the end of the year, like April, May. But it's very early. We're only in February right now as we're recording this podcast. But Jalen Duren's stock is definitely trending up, and you love to see it. We don't want to come up here and shit on players every podcast. I will give credit where credit's due. Past month, Jalen Duren has played really good basketball. He's had 7 out of 8 double doubles over his last 8 games or so. So I'm happy to see him being more locked in, being more involved offensively at the end of the day. Red Baron, Jalen Duren made 4 or 5 passes a day that made me say, wow, for a big man, his court vision is amazing. That's something like I think is somewhat underrated about JD's game. He's always been a pretty good passer. It's just certain situations, you don't want Point Duren bringing the ball up the court. And I think he's done a much better job of giving the ball to either Asar or Cade or even Marcus Sasser for that matter. But I think in dribble handoff situations, Jalen Duren's vision and some of the passes that he can make you look like, wow, like this guy actually has a bag in terms of just like facilitating. And I think there's more to explore there. Like you could kind of see him, running more DHOs with the wings on this team, with Cade and others. Now we're going to get to some Dallas comments. I see Chuck Brewer and Jay Hart have some questions and comments about Dallas. Chuck Brewer, Dallas is pathetic. Didn't see what they could get. Only called and dealt with the Lakers. That GM better hope this works out, or he's going to be fishing himself. Yeah, so like the more we heard about Dallas throughout the night, because I don't think I went to bed until like 3-4 in the morning, because I was just like, as soon as that trade happened, I was just like wound, and I'm thinking to myself, like, what are we honestly doing? I believe that when you look at the ownership group, Mark Cuban is no longer involved in Dallas any way, shape, or form. He's not an owner. He doesn't even run basketball ops like he used to. I honestly think when this trade happened, I thought it was a joke. I thought it was like NBA Central or Ballsack Sports or something like that. I thought Shams got hacked, but Dallas made the initial contact. The Lakers weren't calling about Luca. They're like, hey, like, would you trade Anthony Davis for Luca Doncic. And I bet you as soon as they got that phone call, they hung up because the asking price for Luca, I felt like you could have got way more. You could have got way more if you wanted to. Now, that's not saying Anthony Davis isn't a good player. He is. But the caliber of player that Luka Doncic currently is, I'm sorry, if New York Knicks can get 5 first-round picks for Mikal Bridges, I don't even want to imagine what the Mavericks could have gotten for Luka Doncic. I felt like they could have gotten a lot more, but you listen to Nico Harrison in his press conference today, really harp on defense. Defense wins championships, and there's a little bit of rumors talking about how, you know, the Mavericks were concerned with Luka's health and not always being in the best available shape. And oh, yeah, he's available. He was available for over a $300 million contract extension. Now he's not going to get that $300 million. There's $100 million off the table that he can re-sign for with the Lakers. But I think for the Lakers, you're getting a guy that you could build around. You're getting a franchise player at 25 years old. Who knows how a Luka LeBron led team is going to work? I have my questions and concerns about it, but offensively, I think they're going to be a headache in the playoffs to deal with. But I don't know, man. I wish the Mavs well. You got Kyrie, you got Clay, you got Anthony Davis, and you got some fun pieces like PJ Washington and Daniel Gafford. It'll be really interesting to see come playoff time if those two teams possibly match up. I hope they do. But yeah, that trade just to me still feels fake. It doesn't feel real, and I can't imagine how Mavs fans are feeling. But at the end of the day, I think I agree with you, Chuck. Dallas could have got more, but I think they were really fixated on getting better defensively. And when Anthony Davis is healthy, he's one of the best rim protectors in the league. He could score at all 3 levels. So it'll be really interesting to see how he meshes with Kyrie and the Mavericks in Dallas. But yeah, I think ultimately, like a lot of teams probably would have, put their hat in the race if they knew Luka was available. Sounds like, Dallas didn't even make it known that he was available. So that's why the Lakers got that deal and nobody else did. J Hart asked, what does the Luka trade mean for the Pistons? I don't really think it changes the Pistons' course of action. I think they will still be buyers, J Hart, if the right deal becomes available. Now, everyone obviously has a price in the NBA. I don't think anyone's untouchable. But I don't really think this will really affect what the Detroit Pistons currently do. I think if there's a player out there that they feel that can really help upgrade this roster and help Cade Cunningham and JB Bickerstaff for the long-term future, they will be buyers in that sense. I think they could also be facilitators in trades if they are getting multiple first-round draft picks. They might take on a bloated contract if they're getting something in return. I don't really think this really affects what they want to do long-term because Luka Doncic and Anthony Davis play in the Western Conference. Now, if Luka got traded to the East, maybe we have a different conversation about it. But I really don't think this really affects what their game plan is and what they're going to do long term with this basketball team. But I'm still just kind of puzzled by the trade. Doesn't make a whole lot of sense at the end of the day. Red Baron, there were other GMs in the league that said they would have offered their entire roster for Luka. Can't believe that GM didn't even consult with his head coach before pulling the trigger. Yeah, I mean, the more you read about the Luka trade, Red Baron, it's puzzling. But at the end of the day, they wanted to get better defensively, and Anthony Davis, I guess, is a player they feel that can really upgrade their roster in terms of getting better defensively. I mean, didn't even tell their coach. Like, hey, man, like, didn't even tell Kidd. Like, Jason Kidd in the press conference looked very uncomfortable. If you guys haven't watched it, I mean, I don't understand it, like, whatsoever. Dwayne Irwin does have a question, a trade question with Brandon Ingram. What about a trade about Brandon Ingram to the Pistons? Now, we've talked about Brandon Ingram to the Detroit Pistons ad nauseum. We've talked about it all summer. We've talked about it throughout the season. Sounds like the Pelicans are going to deal him. Now, whether that's to Toronto, whether that's to Chicago, Detroit, we're going to have to wait and see. I think what you have to look at with Brandon Ingram and where he may or may not get traded is a couple things. The first thing is he's on an expiring. He's on a $30+ million expiring contract. That's one. The second thing you have to look at is he changed agencies from Excel, who represents Cade Cunningham and other various NBA stars, to Clutch Sports, Rich Paul. Those guys usually get paid when they're switching agencies mid-season, right? So Brandon Ingram's looking to get paid because he's going to be a free agent. And I think the final thing you have to look at is the guy wants max. He wants probably $200 million. The Pistons aren't really in a position, I believe, this is just my opinion, to go out, trade assets at this deadline to the Pelicans, because the Pelicans have made it known they want expiring contracts, draft picks, and young prospects for Ingram, which they probably will get. I don't think the Pistons are in a position right now to say, we'll give you a young prospect, we'll give you an expiring deal and some future draft capital for Brandon Ingram for about, 30 games this season? There's no guarantee he will sign with you or re-sign with you in the offseason. I think where the Pistons are at, they have a good group of veterans, young guys. If they do make a move, I just don't expect a big splash. Like, I don't expect an Ingram. I don't expect a Levine. I just think when you look at this team and you look who is running this organization right now, Trajan Langdon, Trajan would know Brandon Ingram probably better than anybody. And if he really wanted Brandon Ingram, he probably would have traded for him this summer as soon as he got here, and he didn't. I'm not really expecting fireworks for the Detroit Pistons. I know a lot of fans wanted Ingram, but I just don't know how it would mesh with Cade. It might work, it might not. But you also have to account the health thing with him too. He hasn't always been the most healthy player too, and this is a guy that wants to get paid at the end of the day. I mean, Utah had a plan in place to trade for Ingram this summer, and he would not commit to signing with Utah long term. He obviously has teams he wants to play for, and there just hasn't been a team that maybe is on his list to play for. And also you have to take into account that the Pelicans like the return on it, because the Pelicans just aren't going to sell him off for absolutely nothing. I'm sure they will have a lot of suitors to trade for him. I just don't think Detroit is going to be one of those teams. Have a question from Red Baron. If Ingram gets traded to Toronto, what will the tariffs do to the cap? Okay, Red Baron, you're funny, man. Yeah, I mean, if you know, you know with the tariffs. I know you're just joking. But I wouldn't be surprised, just hypothetically for Toronto, if they sell off on RJ Barrett, reunite Zion and RJ together in New Orleans. They have a mix of veterans, they have draft picks, they have young guys expiring. But this is probably the funniest comment I've honestly seen in quite some time, Red Bear. That is honestly hilarious. Dwayne says, I just want a bigger 4 or a backup point guard. I think we've been talking about this all year, Dwayne. Like, our front court is pretty small, and especially come playoff time, if you match up with teams like Milwaukee or New York, you're going to be at a disadvantage. Even Orlando to an extent, and Indiana. Well, I just named like 4 teams right off the bat. But yeah, like you'd like to get bigger in the front court. I think that's why so many of us were talking about Bobby Portis possibly as a buy low option. He could definitely help this front court, play some power forward, stretch the floor. Backup point guard, I feel like we've been talking about since the beginning of the season, like October, just because we don't have one and we've had an open roster spot and available cap space to possibly get a backup point guard. But I think if you're a Piston fan, that should definitely be on your wish list. A bigger power forward and a backup guard. I have a question from Mr. Zone. Do you chime in on the rumor of the New Orleans Pelicans salary dump? If not, who are the players you expect to get them under the luxury tax? So this was a report from Evan Sedry, who was listening to a Arizona radio sports talk show. So if you guys haven't listened to it or even seen this post on social media, so the Pelicans are looking to get under the salary tax. Some players that I had listed out was Jordan Hawkins. If you guys remember, he was a very highly touted shooter coming out of the draft from UConn. I think Jordan Hawkins, to me, makes so much sense for the Detroit Pistons because you don't know what's going to happen this summer with a Malik Beasley, especially with free agency. I'd also look at Jeremiah Robinson Earl, power forward, Daniel Tice, center. You could even have conversations about Jose Alvarado. I think all of those guys make a whole lot of sense for the Detroit Pistons, and it would help the Pelicans get under that luxury tax line. If the Pistons really want to, make a smaller deal, because that was the report, Mr. Zone. Me personally, I'd be really interested in Jordan Hawkins, in Jose Alvarado. At the end of the day, I feel like Jose would make so much sense for this team. He's a guard. Trajan's very familiar with him. And he's a backup guard, right? It'll be really interesting to see, because apparently they do already have a smaller deal in place. They've already, I guess, verbally agreed to a trade between the Detroit Pistons and New Orleans Pelicans. We're just going to have to wait and see over the next coming days whether or not they will make this trade. I have a question from Only Marquise. LaVine to the Pistons would be great. I think from a basketball perspective, he would. I think some people have a problem with LaVine is contractually. His contract has one less year on it, right? But I think what some fans are still, having conversations about is they think the asking price for LaVine is the same price as it was last year. It's not. I can guarantee you the Bulls are asking way more for Zach LaVine as they were last year. You guys remember the reports. Pistons were willing to trade James Wiseman, Bojan Bogdanovic, and Marvin Bagley in a second to get a Zach LaVine. That was a low selling point for LaVine, and trade almost happened. Obviously, Zach LaVine elects to have surgery, and it didn't happen. He's got one less year on his deal, and I think he has way more value because why? He's playing probably the best basketball of his career, scoring over 25 points a game, being just a complete terror on both ends of the court. I think defensively, he's actually had a average defensive year. And when I mean average, for his terms of just the way he plays defense, it's been good. If I'm a Piston fan or just a Zach LaVine fan for that matter, I think the teams I would look at is Golden State. Golden State's very desperate to get back to playing better than 500 basketball. I think Miami could make some sense. You never know what happens with Jimmy Butler. The Milwaukee Bucks, he could just get traded into the same NBA Central Division. I think the Bucks make some sense for Zach LaVine. I think for the Pistons, you're probably going to have to give up some, your young players, draft picks, and assets. It's not going to be the dumping ground as it was last year because he was on a longer deal, and the Bulls really just wanted to sell off on his bloated contract. The contract has one less year on it. I think just from a fit perspective, he makes some sense. Cade would definitely flourish with a player of a Zach LaVine archetype, but you also have to remember, if you are a Piston fan, you have someone called Jaden Ivey. I'm not saying Jaden Ivey and Zach LaVine are the same type of player by any means, but what I will say is give Jaden Ivey a couple of years. He could definitely average 20 points a game, score at all three levels, be a threat from the perimeter. I think Pistons fans need to be a little bit more patient with this young core. Let them grow, let them develop. We've seen what happens when you have a coach that comes in here, instills culture, holds them accountable. We're 25 and 24 in 49 games this season, currently the 7th seed, and pushing for that playoffs. I think we have a really good sample size of what this basketball team currently is as constructed. I like LaVine, always been a fan of his. I think for Pistons fans that want him in Detroit, I understand it. Guy's an all-star. We've seen him light up the Pistons for 50 point outbursts, but I think be patient with Jaden Ivey at the end of the day. This season showed me that Monty didn't try to win at all last year. Dwayne, yeah, I think Monty's head wasn't in it personally, but I think most of us aren't going to turn down the type of money that Tom Gores offered Monty Williams, but Monty was just not mentally in it. And you could tell all bench lineups, starting Killian Hayes for 40 plus games last season didn't do the Pistons any favors, benching Jaden Ivey for a majority of the season. But I think overall this deadline is going to be very interesting. I think the Pistons will get better. I think they will add pieces to fix the current holes that they have in their roster, fix the backup point guard hole, possibly get some more front court depth, some more size at the power forward, maybe even possibly the center position. You never really know, but it'll be really interesting to see what happens with this basketball team. But they do end the week 2-2. They're on a 2-game winning streak. They do host the Atlanta Hawks tomorrow. I'm going to wrap up this podcast, you guys. We've been on for about 39 minutes. We have 80 of you guys in here right now. We're going to be talking to you guys tomorrow, immediately after the Detroit Pistons and the Atlanta Hawks game. So I appreciate you guys coming on in, chatting some Detroit basketball with me. Trade deadline. I love this time of year. It's like Christmas for me and you guys, I'm sure. But on your way out, if you can, definitely hit that like button. It does help the YouTube algorithm push out more Detroit Pistons content to you guys each and every day. And if you were an audio listener, make sure you do give us a 5-star review. Those really help push out the podcast to more people like you that are a Detroit Piston fan at the end of the day. But see you guys tomorrow. Take care and go Pistons.